Hey there, it's me again. Larry who? Uncle Pleasant, or as one relative recently called me, Uncle Pleasant. You know, the beauty of being adopted is if I ever fall out of favor with any relative, all I gotta do is go find someone else that looks like them, and I'm right back in business again. Ha! Anyway, hey, this video is, I know, dragged my feet forever putting this out. I've just been overloaded. Website orders coming in, everybody and their dog wanting a favor, and nobody wanting to choke up any money to pay me for favors. Go figure. I wonder who they vote for. Anyway, yeah, I'm finally going to put this video together. This is to kill two birds with one stone. Bird number one is to do a demo on the Boilermaker and explain the operation of it. And the other one is because a bunch of people keep finding those old videos from 6 years ago on this channel that I put together for my cousin who was just getting into distillation. And I put together like a playlist of 4 videos showing him how to make whiskey Larry's way. And no, it's not really good. I was new to it at that time, and I was following the old Still in the Clear channel, you know, Cyrus Mason, following his lead, if you want to call it that. And in the spirit of everything that he does, it was nothing more than a cornstarch flavored sugar wash. Everything that guy does, or at least he did at that time, was nothing but UJSSM, meaning you boil a bunch of corn, get the starch out, don't convert it, just dump a bunch of sugar in there and then yeast and then call it bourbon. I don't do that. The videos that I put together, at least I converted the starch, but I still added sugar. I don't do that anymore. So I'm gonna do a demo of the Boilermaker, and I'm gonna do one of what I call Larry's basic bourbon, which is nothing more than corn and oats, no sugar. And you might hit about 1.060 on a hydrometer. If you get really lucky, you might get 1.065, or really, really lucky, 1.070. But I mean, you got to buy a lottery ticket and go pray to the stars and all that before you'll get that high. But we're going to do things my way, which is not going to be everybody's way. And no, I am not starting a distillation channel here to teach people how to make whiskey mashes and such. I'm just doing a demo on the Boilermaker and showing how I do my thing. My Boilermaker for this thing, I showed in another video converting this. This is the same thing as a 9-gallon Digiboil, 120 volt version, where I bypassed the internal temperature controller so I can use a Boilermaker with it. I stuck a thermal well in the back of it, about mid-height, or I should say exactly mid-height, at the 4.5 gallon mark. And the Boilermaker is on the floor, which is not optimal because it only has one antenna, and the antenna is horizontal when it's laying on the floor, so therefore it's 90 degrees out of phase with the antennas that are on the router. So it causes a little bit of a signal loss, but this is just to show that you have to try pretty hard to make the Boilermaker not work. So this one is set up with dynamic IP address, DHCP as they call it, no static IP address, and it's just connecting to the router. So this is just to show people that if you order one and I put your Wi-Fi network name and password in there, send it to you, it'll attach to your router, and you look in your router for all the connected devices. You find the one that starts with ESP32-6 random characters. That's going to be the Boilermaker. So that's about it. And let's see, I'll show you. I got the Boilermaker on my phone right there. The mode that I'm going to be using on this is called Cruise Then Brew, which means it does the temperature cruise, which is a PI controller, and then it switches over to brewing/fermentation, which is a PID controller. So it'll use that to bring this up to 180 degrees, and it'll hold it there for 90 minutes and shut off. Now, as for what I always do, I still use a brew bag. Just makes it easier to clean up, keeps your mash from coming into contact with the heating element, which isn't a problem anyway with the Boilermaker. The corn that I use, I have right here. I'll put links in the description for this. I get this from Mate Briscoe at Briscoe Farms in Missouri. I bought 6 different types of corn from him about a year ago. This is one of them, kind of hard to see in there. It's called Cherokee White Eagle. He sells a lot of different corns. He also sells malted barley, wheat, rye. Don't really know what all he sells. I haven't looked at the website in a while, but there's 10 pounds of this corn in here, and my go-to for everything is 2 pounds of grain for every gallon of water. So I have 10 pounds here of corn, and then what I do, since we don't have a brew supply store here, I buy Quaker oats, the big ones. These come with 2-pound bags in them. So there's 10 pounds of corn, 2 pounds of oats, that's 12 pounds. I use 6 gallons of water. And the way I do it, I fill it up to about 4 gallons or so. I put the corn and the oats in there while the water is room temperature or cold. It eliminates the problem of running into dough balls that you have to break up all the time. After I get those in there with about 4 gallons of water, I'll top up the water level here to about 6.5 gallons, because there's a false bottom where you lose a half gallon of water. So I'll bring it up to about 6.5 gallons, and I'll start the Boilermaker. Once it gets up to, I usually I go to about 120 degrees. I don't use powdered enzymes anymore. I use these high temp liquid enzymes. I'll put links to these in the description as well. The first one, 𝙉𝙊𝙏𝙀. I add this at the beginning when the water's about 120 degrees or so, and leave it in there and stir it in till it gets up, when it hits 180 degrees, it stays there for 90 minutes. After it shuts off, I let it cool down to about 140, 145, and I add this 𝙉𝙊𝙏𝙀, and I just let, I stir that in as well, and I let it just cool until the next day, till it reaches 85 degrees, 85, 90, just depends. Usually I shoot for 85. I'll switch my Boilermaker over to PID mode, or brewing/fermentation mode, at 85 degrees, and it'll run like that for a week. This thing will just continue to chug along. Before I had this, I just used fish tank heaters that were cranked up all the way full blast, and that's what I used in another big brew pot. This makes it a whole lot easier, since I can brew and ferment all in the same batch or same unit. And then after that's all done, I got this transfer pump. So after it's all fermented out, I hook this up to the output of the DigiBoil, pump it over to my still, which is right there, and then I distill it. My method is stupid simple, and it doesn't take a whole lot of work, and like I said, it's a stupid simple recipe. So rather than going any further with this, what I'm gonna do is get things going. I'm gonna go switch over to my laptop so I can show you the settings on the Boilermaker and explain them to you, and just explain the operation of it. Then we'll come back and start building the mash. Expect a lot of jump cuts and who knows what else, because it's not like this is something I can go, oops, I fucked up, and take something out and do it again. Nope. I get one shot, and if I fuck it up, well, I fuck it up. So be back in a few seconds. Okay, here we are. I'm back at my laptop, and what you see on your screen right now is the slowest web browser in the world, otherwise known as Firefox. And the only reason I'm using this is because it has a mobile app view. Makes it easier to test apps as if they're running on a tablet or a phone. Like, I can change this to phone width. Hey, what do you know about that? But I'm going to change it back to my iPad size. There we go. All right, so this is the Boilermaker web user interface. This name up here in the upper right, this can be customized if you have the unit connected to your computer by way of a serial cable and using a terminal program. This right here, the slave units. What this does, the Boilermaker allows you to have up to 4 units configured as slaves that follows one as the master. And then actually each one of those slaves can be the master for 4 more slaves. So it works like a big old Amway pyramid scheme. And what this will show you is if you have 4 slaves configured, this will show a 4 right here. And this will show you how many are actually online and pinging. The first mode that this is starting up in is constant power mode. If I click on this here, I can actually change the mode. And those are the 4 modes there: constant power, temperature cruise, brewing / fermentation, and then cruise, then brew, which is what I'm going to be using for my brewing task over here. But I'm going to go through each one of these individually just so I can explain them. Constant power is exactly what it sounds like. It's basically working like an SCR controller. There's no temperature management. As you look down here on this lower right-hand side, the numbers that are in white are disabled. But this blue one here, the 25%, that's your power. You can set it to any power level and it'll just stay there. So when I say it works like a SCR controller, an SCR controller, they run continuously at the same level and your temperature continues to rise. So that's what these are good for. I oftentimes have my Smart Still controller run the Boilermaker in constant power mode, but none of these other settings here are active except for clear down at the bottom, the timer. You can turn that on or off. Enable countdown timer, yes or no. And you can set the amount of time that you want it to run for. So 1 to 1,440 minutes, which is 24 hours. I am going to be using 90 minutes on mine. So that's the constant power mode. We'll go to the next one, which is going to be temperature cruise. And this, as I explained earlier, is what's called a PI controller, not PID. This one doesn't use a derivative value to go back and tell the controller how much to modify the power level and such. So this is just strictly, it's temperature controlled, but it's predictive. And it's kind of a dumb power controller, but it's intentionally this way. This is what the Airhead upgrade for air stills uses. Strictly temperature cruise. And you can set your target temperature, your startup power. Like I'm going to have this thing, I'm going to set my temperature, my target 178.2 or actually 81.2, since everything here works in Celsius and then just translates over to Fahrenheit for you. 81.2, when it reaches the target temperature, it will do a fallback. This is going to be ignored in cruise then brew mode, because rather than falling back to 10% power, it's just going to flip over to the brewing fermentation mode. And the adjustment rate, so what I have here is a deviation rate, and then every 60 seconds I'm going to check the temperature, and if it's low, I'm going to increase the power by 1%. If it's over, every 60 seconds I'm going to check it, and I'm going to pull it back down. The deviation rate here, what I'm doing is looking for how much temperature change there has been. If I have a target temperature of 81.2 and my deviation rate is 0.5, I have to go to at least 81.7 to signal to the system that I'm under temperature and I need to increase it. And then the rest period, that's how long, if we were to stay in temperature cruise mode after the fallback, this is how long to rest before we start doing any power management or temperature / power management. This is to allow time for the turbulence in the boiler to settle down before we start going, okay, let's start paying attention to what's going on and adjust our power accordingly. Progressive run, if it's enabled, once you hit the target temperature, like in this case, over the course of 1 hour, I'm going to add 1 degree Celsius or 1.8 here, And the reason for that is with this target temperature up here, I want to bring this up to 180 Fahrenheit. So that's what this is. So after I've reached the target temperature and it does the flip over, I'm going to have some overshoot, so I'm going to be at my target temperature anyway. And what this does is it slowly works up, so I maintain that 180 degrees. So let's move on to the next one. This is a complete PID controller here. Same thing again, you have your target temperature, and then you have your 3 gain types for PID. I'm going to suggest that people just look up videos on YouTube to understand how PID controllers work, because it's really scientific and it would take me forever to fully explain things. We have a sample time, so what this does is tells the PID controller to look at the target temperature every 10 seconds to see how much change there was in the temperature between this sample and the next one. And, just keeps going on like that. That's what makes these things so precise, is it's always looking at the temperature every 10 seconds and deciding, should I or should I not increase the power by 1% or more? Just all depends on how you're running it. The PWM duty time, pulse width modulation duty time. This is how many seconds to run the solid state relay, which turns the heating element on and off. On 120 volt heating elements, they're less efficient than a 240 volt one. So like in this case, my 1800 watt heating elements in the DigiBoil, I run them on a 2-second duty cycle. So at 50%, that heating element is on for 1 second, off for 1 second. Goes up or down based on that whole 2-second time frame. We already covered these down here, and then the final operation mode is the cruise then brew. And like I said, what that does, it runs it in temperature cruise mode until it reaches the target temperature. As you can see, it just flipped over to cruise then brew, and which is all the settings here are still identical to temperature cruise mode. When we hit the target temperature, it flips over to brewing/fermentation. And that's pretty much the operation of the Boilermaker in a nutshell. You can always check out what I put on the GitHub page. It's extremely documented over there. Probably more documented over there than what I covered in a total of 9 minutes here. That's that for this part. We're going to go back over to the DigiBoil and start building the mash and get the shooting match on the road. Okay, here's a quick little show of what we got. There's the Boilermaker, where this thing's sitting on the floor. Like I said, the antenna's horizontal, unlike this one that's on the wall where it's upright. This one's going to have a weaker signal because the antenna's 90 degrees out of phase with the antennas on the router. Now, let's see. Yeah, you can kind of see in there. There's the thermo well I installed in the DigiBoil. And I did the same thing down here on the front where the valve is. Rather than having the valve just go through the wall with a silicone gasket, I put a thermal well in there, and has a silicone hose on it with a quick connect to the pump. And there's the water in it up to about the 4.5 gallon mark. It's up there even with the thermal well. So I'm going to get the bag in there, and I'm going to start adding the grains so that they get all nice and soggy before I crank up the heat on it. Back in a second. Okay, and just like that, the grain is in there along with the bag. And as you can see, it's got kind of a blue color to it because that's actually blue corn. It just looked white when it was all ground up. But I learned to start doing it this way because I found that when you dump corn, ground corn into a bunch of hot water, it turns into a big dough ball because the hot water scorches the outside of it and basically creates a big slimy, cornstarch sleeve around it. And then you end up having to break it up. So I learned to start adding it when the water's cold and it gets it all saturated. And now I can add the heat to it. It's not like I'm making beer here. All I'm doing is extracting starch. Not really any flavors to speak of. So we'll get that started and I'll be back in another second or two. Okay, now that we got all of the grain in there, there's the Boilermaker on my phone. You can see that it's not running and the temperature, yikes, it's currently 71.2 degrees Fahrenheit. So I'm going to go ahead and start it. If I can learn to run a phone upside down, that would be great. There we go. Great job, Larry. And you can see over here, now it's flashing. It says active. Once it gets up to temperature and the progression starts, it will say progressive up there. And after the progression finishes, it will say active again, and it'll have a plus sign next to it, indicating that it has completed a progressive run. So we're going to let her go, and I'll be back here in a few minutes. I'm going to add the enzymes as soon as that temperature gets up to about 120 degrees. Okay, well, that thing's done. It finished its progressive and timed run probably, I don't know, 20 minutes ago. So I already switched it over to perpetual 85 degree Fahrenheit PID run, and it's just going to go until whenever it gets done finishing fermenting. I haven't even added the yeast yet because I'm still at 153.1 degrees Fahrenheit. Not sure if you can see that or not. Maybe. I don't know. And after it drops to that, I'll do a starch test and see how I'm looking. After it gets down another 10 degrees, I'm going to add the second enzyme that goes in there. But that's pretty much all there is to it. I know this is a rather Reader's Digest condensed look at things, but really, if I were to do the whole thing, you know, step by step, and a camera following me around for everything, we'd be here for a couple hours, and no one's going to sit through that. A few things I wanted to add before I wrap this all up. When you get one of these things, I always tell people, make sure you have a decent router. If you have a router that's provided by your internet provider, oftentimes those things are total shit, and they don't give you administrative access to them. If you have a decent internet company that provides decent equipment, by all means stick with what you have because it likely works. But recently I had a guy buy one of these things. He was in Michigan, that's all I remember, and his internet provider, believe it or not, was still Earthlink. I did not know that company was still in business, but they gave him the shittiest router. It just, nothing worked. The Boilermaker would connect to it and stay connected for about maybe 5 minutes, and then it would just disappear. And it turned out that the router was using band steering, and it was, even though this thing is not compatible with 5 gigahertz Wi-Fi, the router was still trying to steer it over to his 5 gigahertz network. Routers can tell if a device supports 5 gigahertz Wi-Fi, and it was still trying to shove it over there. So he ended up getting a cheap $55 TP-Link router, similar to the one that I use here, and they work perfectly fine. So that's all I can say is beware of whatever the internet provider provides you. A decent router is not that expensive. You can tell them to take theirs and jam it up their ass and buy a cheap one for 55 bucks and plug it into their modem or even into their router. Just don't use their Wi-Fi that's built into it. Set up a separate network. But other than that, these things, they work. There's just no real thinking about it, as you saw. Well, except for when I'm trying to run a cell phone upside down. Remember that Airhead installation guide video that I put together? I explained that I'm blind in this eye. Causes parallax error. So when I'm looking at my screen like this, I think I'm touching on that. No, I watched the video clip No, I was touching way below the button. I thought I was tapping right on it. So shit happens when you're 50% blind. So I think that's about all I got for this. Honestly, read through the documentation on the GitHub page. I can't possibly cover everything because my memory just ain't that good. Hell, I'm almost 60. I'm practicing up for when I do go to the Social Security office. I won't have to put on an act. I can just say, no, really, I have shit for brains. Give me my money. You know, I'm going to do that in 2 more years too. I'm not waiting until I'm 65. I'm debt-free. That's the beauty of being debt-free. Debt-free, I have good savings, and I have side income selling these things. I can live off of Social Security plus my side income and my IRAs that I can dip into at 64 and a half. I'm retiring. Screw it. 62, I'm done working for anybody. So that's about all I got for this right now. I doubt that I'm going to do a video showing the distillation of this. I've already put together a 2-part video on the usage of the Raspberry Pi Smart Still Controller and how I do things. All you got to do is watch that video again and imagine that I'm using this instead of the sugar wash that was in it. Oh, and I'm going to be doing a pot still run rather than a reflux run. So that's all. Have a good one. Thanks for sticking around. I know this video took about 30 minutes, I'm guessing, is what this is going to run, so I won't keep you any longer. Have a good one. See you around next time. Bye.